I'd say it's time to shut down the Department of Education. I think Trump agrees. Let's see. Let's find this one.
Why nominate Linda McMahon to be the Education Department Secretary if you're going to get rid of the Education Department?
Because I told Linda, I hope you do a great job and put yourself out of a job. I want her to put herself out of a job. Education Department. So we're ranked number 40 out of 40 schools, right? We're ranked number 1 in cost per pupil. So we spend more per pupil than any other country in the world. And we're ranked at the bottom of the list. We're ranked very badly. And what I want to do is let the states run schools. I believe strongly in school choice. But in addition to that, I want the states to run schools. And I want Linda to put herself out of a job.
Do you think that's something you can do with an executive order, or are you going to ask Congress to do it?
I'd like to be able to. Look, if I could give the schools back to Iowa and Idaho and Indiana and all these places that run properly, there's many of them. I think. So if you look at the list, Denmark, Sweden, Norway, believe it or not, China's doing very well on that list, a list of well-educated, where they run their school system well. You have a lot of countries, not surprising names. I think that if you moved our schools into some of these states that are really well-run states, they would be as good as Denmark and Norway and Sweden and some of the other states. And then you'd have the laggards, and you know who they are. I don't have to go to it. But you'd have the laggards, the same laggards that are laggards with everything else, including crime. But even them, you'll break it into systems. As an example, if you went to New York, you go to Westchester County, you go to Dutchess County, you go to Suffolk and Long Island and Nassau and Long Island. You have maybe 6 or 7 locations. And you have New York City, which would include the 5 boroughs. And I think even that would run much better than it does right now. Same thing with Los Angeles or California. You'd have Riverside, you'd break it up into 6 or 7, but most of them would be states, and you'd have one, like in Iowa, you give it to the state of Iowa, you give it to the state of Indiana, these are really well-run states. They don't have debt, they don't have problems, they don't have any crimes, relatively speaking, to speak of. And you would have education that would be the equivalent of Norway and Denmark and various other places that are at the top of the list. So we're at the bottom of the list, and we're the most expensive. We're at the top of the list when it comes to cost per pupil. We spend more money per pupil than any other nation in the world, and yet we're rated number 40. The last ratings came out, you saw them. So they talk about 40 countries. We're rated number 40. And I say that if we did this, we would go 20, 30 notches up. We could do great. And we would have some of the best districts in the world.
All right. So hit that like button, first of all. We got 150 people in here. Only got 40 likes. Come on. Hook a brother up. But, guys, this is crazy. This is like the medical thing. We spend so much on this, and it's pathetic. Hey, look at some of these scores. Here, I'm going to show you. Look at some of these freaking scores. People are finally starting to put up these great charts that didn't exist not too long ago. I mean, I've looked into this stuff before, and they don't show these charts. I mean, now people are starting to make them. So there's change in spending and scores since 2013. So spending up 56%, scores down, what was that? 10 to 15 points in math and reading. So we're spending more. We're getting a worse result in math and reading. I don't even think we're in the top 10 in, like compared to other countries, which is crazy. Then look at this. So just like hospitals, there's a chart out there that shows the number of doctors versus the number of administrators in hospitals. Since the 70s, doctors, like tiny little increase, barely. Administrators skyrocketing. So it's all these like BS jobs. There's a book about that, by the way, called BS Jobs, that like totally unnecessary. We're like creating these positions to like justify more spending. People who don't really do anything are making money off the giant slush fund. Like, what was it? I think the top 3 spending categories for the U.S. government is, aside from interest on the debt that we pay to a non-government organization, the Fed, it's defense, it's medical, like healthcare stuff, And then it's education. I think the medical stuff is 1.6 trillion. The defense is 900 billion. Then Department of Education, I think it's like 300 million. So look at this. Employees since 1970, way up. Total cost, way up. And then the enrollment down, barely up a little bit in the last 10, 20 years. Math scores flat, reading scores flat, science scores negative. This is terrible. Disgusting. So let's look at I'll pull up real quick. Spending budget of US government. So we looked at this chart the other night. We looked at for the purposes of, what was it? I think we're looking at medical stuff. Aha, here we go. Where's education? All right, so 52 billion. No, I thought it was much more than that. Well, I mean, still a lot, but shit. Really? Hold on a second. Department of Education budget. All right, so how's their budget 79 million or 79 billion? And then on that thing, it says 52 billion. See, like, we have no idea where anything's going when it comes to money. Oh my God. It'll be like Judgment Day if we get this freaking IRS audited. If we could get a real audit on the Pentagon, oh my God. Ooh, that's a good poll question. Would you, by the way, you guys are based, you said 89% or something like that, or 83% said that Trump was elected by the hidden hand. All right, so we got it. You guys overwhelmingly want the Department of Education to be ended. Got it. Now I'm going to put up, would you rather audit the Pentagon or the IRS? Would you rather audit IRS, Pentagon? Now, one of the most interesting things out there that I'm going to have somebody on for this topic named her name is Catherine Austin Fitz. I'm going to get her on pretty soon. She talks about this topic of, I mean, well, let me first say that I've been talking about this topic for a long time before I even knew about her, but I finally found that she's somebody who talks about this, so I'm gonna get her on. But like, there's $35 trillion that we cannot account for. Missing 35 trillion. The Pentagon's $35 trillion accounting black hole. While it shouldn't come as a surprise for an organization that has famously failed to pass every audit, so it started getting audited in 2017, has never passed one. But, you know, the IRS and the people with guns will come into our home and grab us and throw us in a cage if we don't pass an audit or if we don't pay our taxes. But the biggest cost of our entire government, of our taxpayer money, is this Pentagon. They can't be bothered to pass an audit. The Pentagon was nevertheless able to shock some observers this week with a new batch of financial numbers. This is from 2020, by the way, so this number could be worse today. According to Bloomberg's Anthony Capaccio, the Department of Defense made $35 trillion in accounting adjustments in 2019, easily surpassing in such adjustments recorded in 2018. Capaccio notes that the number dwarfs the $738 billion of defense-related funding in the latest U.S. budget, a spending plan that includes the most expensive weapon systems in the world, including the F-35 jet, as well as new aircraft carriers, destroyers, submarines, blah, blah, blah. So what are these accounting adjustments? Todd Harrison of the Center for Strategic and International Studies says they represent a lot of double, triple, and quadruple counting of the same money as it got moved between accounts with the Pentagon. A lot may be an understatement. According to government data, there was 562,000 adjustments made in the Pentagon's books in 2018. So that just sounds really messy and really easy to steal money from, to say the least. I mean, did you know that on average, every defense contractor at the very least double charges us and like price gouges us for the things they built for us? Like, this is actually a bipartisan thing where senators have like from both sides have talked about it. Pentagon price gouging. Like, the things I really focus on are defense and medical when it comes to wasting money, because like I despise wasted potential more than anything, pretty much anything out there. And like the fact that we're still the strongest country in spite of wasting so much money. Oh my God. Like, imagine where we could be right now if we actually spent money on things with a good return on investment. Like, it's mind blowing. So here we go. Yeah. $4,000 soaps dispensers on Air Force planes. Oh, just you wait. Provisions in this year's NDAA would allow military contractors to gouge taxpayers even more. Time is running out for Congress to pass the annual defense policy bill after the election. Lawmakers must reconcile the differences between their revisions of the National Defense Authorization Act and set the top line for Pentagon spending in fiscal year 2025. When they do, they must strip two measures that will make it easier for contractors to engage in price gouging. While the House abided by the spending caps Congress established in the last year's debt deal, the Senate added about $25 billion to the president's budget request for the Pentagon, bringing the department's top line to a whopping $912 billion. This is excessive, and the increase will not make Americans any safer. Lawmakers should communicate that those negotiating the final NDAA. Members of Congress cannot, however, overlook two seemingly benign provisions in the House version of the bill. It refrained from Section 11 of the House NDAA would bolster contractors' ability to price gouge the Pentagon. Where'd my spot go? Already a significant issue for military. Just this week, the Department of Defense Inspector General found that Boeing overcharged the Air Force by nearly $1 million on various products for the C-17 military transfer aircraft. In one case, Boeing overcharged the military for a soap dispenser by nearly 8,000%, more than 80 times the commercial price. Like, that's an act of terrorism. Straight up. Tell me how it's not. That's like stealing from the country. $1 million, a drop in the bucket when it comes to overall Pentagon spending. But this isn't the first time Boeing has price gouged the department, and the practice is rampant throughout the arms industry. 2 weeks ago, the Department of Justice announced that Raytheon will pay nearly $1 billion to resolve a government investigation that exposed the company for overcharging on government contracts. You know, the problem is that there's only like 4 or 5 of these guys left after the budget cuts in 91 after the Soviet Union collapsed. Like, there's like 200 of these guys, but they all start falling apart because the military industrial complex shrivels up and dies and there's not a war going on. So, I mean, which is probably good for the bigger ones because the little guys really started to shrivel up and die, and then their assets got bought up by the big ones that remained. And then places like Lockheed Martin, they put their freaking president on the board of the committee to expand NATO and start pushing for like NATO to buy weapons and jets and all this crap. So, you know, they let the little guys kind of shrivel up and die. And then they found a reason for the world, or for the allies of America, to start spending a shit ton of money on American-made weapons. Where were we? Whistleblowers exposed both Boeing and Raytheon for price gouging. Without them, the agencies may have never discovered that the contractors overcharged taxpayers. So let's see. Unfortunately, the true scale of military price gouging is unknown. The Pentagon obligated $431 billion for military contractors in fiscal year 2023, nearly half its total budget. So the government often relies on whistleblowers to alert potential price gouging by military contractors. Lawmakers, by the way, just so we're clear, like, I don't know how closely you guys follow this stuff or whatever. Like, yeah, you probably don't think about that. Like, that half that $900 billion like doesn't go to our military. It goes towards people that build shit for our military. Lawmakers can also request inspectors general to conduct investigations into potential misconduct. Several members are dedicated to this effort and to preventing contractors from overcharging the government in the future. Congress overall, however, has played an integral role in expanding the opportunities for price gouging. Yeah, they have, because there's this thing they call the iron triangle of the military-industrial complex, where, like, just like we saw in Ukraine, that's a great model for it. So Congress gets lobbied by the military-industrial complex, and Congress yells and screams about, oh, we need to allocate this money to this war effort. We need to give money to fight in the Middle East or to help Ukraine fight Russia and save democracy. And then, they allocate the money, they send it out there, and Ukraine receives the money, and they're like, okay, now we need to buy the actual stuff from the people who can make it, which is the American military industrial complex, the defense contractors. So, they receive a shit ton of money, like to the point where, like, they were making so much off the Ukraine war this year that they were like, some companies were like backed up for with orders for like the next year and a half. Like, they were that far and behind with orders. So, and then, they get a shit ton of money, and then they return the favor of the people who helped this thing pass by, funding their campaigns. So, contractor tells the problem to Congress. Congress tells the problem to the public. They allocate the money. Money ends up going back to the defense contractors. The defense contractors pay for the campaigns. Sections 8, 11, and maybe I should pull up a picture of that iron triangle of military industrial complex. Here we go. Quick little detour. So to check this thing out. This is when I really got red pilled in national security school. All right, so we got, let's see. All right, here we go. So we got large military contractors, campaign contributions to Congress. Then Congress, tax funding to Department of Defense. Department of Defense pays the large contractors, and it's a nice, beautiful circle, right? And they all live happily ever after. Let's see, like, there's like infinite freaking rabbit holes we could go down. But let's go back to this thing. So we're at the part where section 8, 11, 8, 12. Okay. Where were we? Aha. Sections 8, 11, and 8, 12 of the House NDA are part of decades-long effort to legalize price gouging. That's crazy. Congress has achieved this goal in part by broadening the array of products and services considered to be commercial by the Pentagon. According to the Federal Acquisition Regulation, contractors are not required to submit the Pentagon certified cost and price data for commercial products and services. Oh, yeah. Why would you require them to do that with the most expensive thing we do? These data include the cost of labor and the price of materials that must be current, complete, and accurate. So let me just say that again. According to the Federal Acquisition Regulation, contractors are not required to submit to the Pentagon certified cost and pricing data for commercial products and services. That's crazy. Like, even in the freaking auto industry, like where you repair cars, you're like, it's regulated to where you can only charge a certain amount per hour per labor. And that's tiny compared to this. This is, like, again, the most expensive thing that we do in the world. More often than not, the Pentagon needs certified costs and pricing data to negotiate fair prices with military contractors. Certified data is particularly critical when the department is negotiating prices for products or services that may not be available in the civilian marketplace, or for which there is a sole source. In these cases, Pentagon officials have few other tools to ensure they are making fair deals with military contractors. In theory, it would be easier for the Pentagon to negotiate reasonable prices for commercial products and services. Commercially, Commerciality implies some level of price competition, but Congress has broadened the definition of commercial products and services to the degree that the designation has become virtually meaningless. There is no requirement, for example, that commercial products are sold to the public. Section 811 would further expand what products and services are considered commercial, exempting an even greater portion of military contractors from certified cost and pricing data requirements. This would further erode the Pentagon's bargaining power in negotiations with military contractors. While Section 811 broadens the pool of so-called commercial products, Section 812 provides the Pentagon the green light to rely on uncertified costs and pricing data in these certain cases. Uncertified data can be incomplete, dated. Uncertified data can be incomplete, dated, or inaccurate. Contractors can legally omit any information that may indicate to the Pentagon that they are charging 80 times the fair reasonable price, as did Boeing for a soap dispenser. Even the White House strongly opposes Section 812, asserting that it would disincentivize contractors from keeping costs under control, creating unnecessary risks for taxpayers. The provision would hamper some prime contractors' ability to obtain certified cost and pricing data from subcontractors, increasing the likelihood that prime contractors overcharge the government, which ultimately pays the bills. The Pentagon is most capable of spending taxpayer dollars wisely when it obtains certified cost and pricing data. It helps the department assess a contractor's cost and thus what its profit margins may be. Sections 811 and 812 of the NDAA only hurts the Pentagon's ability to negotiate fair prices on military contracts. By retaining them in the final NDAA, Congress would be acting against the best interests of both their constituents and the Pentagon. Yep, everybody could dream. So one more thing to put a bow on this is no competes contracts. So this is a big thing that happens too. So there's the Pentagon gives out a lot of these non-compete contracts, which it's a contractual agreement that prevents an employee from this isn't the right thing. What the hell am I thinking of? Pentagon no bid contracts, I think is what I'm thinking of. No bid contracts. What the hell's the thing called? What's the freaking word for it? Come on, help me out in the chat. What's the word I'm thinking of? Shit. Let's see. This is a real test, guys. Can anybody help me out here? What is the freaking word I'm thinking of for where they like? What is it called? Oh man. What is it freaking called? No bid contracts. Is that it? Yeah, I think this is it. No bid contract, also called a sole source contract, is a contract awarded to a single vendor without going through the competitive bidding process, meaning only one company is considered for the work, typically because they are the only one capable of fulfilling the specific requirements. In situations where time is critical, there is only one available supplier to provide the needed goods or services. So let's see. What percent of Pentagon contracts are no bid contracts? Come on, can't give me a number. 32 billion in no contracts to the Pentagon since 1998. I mean, that's a lot, but like compared to what we see, it's not that big of a number. Oh, and then there's another crazy thing called cost plus contracts. Cost plus contract is an arrangement where the contractor is paid for all projects costs plus the fee. The contractor is reimbursed for direct and indirect costs such as labor, materials, and overhead. How it works: Contractor provides an estimate for the project's cost. Invoice contractor sends the invoice for the cost plus the agreed on fee. Client pays contractor after confirming the invoice. The contractor provides regular reports. Client verify costs, benefits, flexibility. Cost plus contracts are flexible, can be used when project scope timeline is uncertain. Shared risk. Client and contractor share the risk of cost overruns. So all of these Pentagon contracts or a lot of them are no bid contracts and cost plus contracts, meaning they don't have to compete with anybody and they could run way over the price. So it's terrible in every possible way. And it's bipartisan to let this happen because the people who vote on this stuff end up benefiting from it. So I'd like to see Trump do something about that. I mean, I wonder if Trump's even aware of this issue, but if he is, I would hope to see him give some attention to it rather than, just throwing favors at Israel. So I think we hammered that point home enough. And we could go on to pretty unfortunate thing that I saw Stephen A. Smith say. Oh, wait. I forgot that this whole thing was about the Department of Education. Hold on. I have another clip to play about that.
Who's taking it? Are they trying to take that money that kids get for tax cuts for billionaires?
Oh, my God.
What's going on? That's why we have to see what they're doing. It is illegal to take that money out of children's mouths and give it to billionaires.
Now, are there areas you think that could be improved or streamlined?
Oh, my God. My members, remember, Al Shanker actually didn't want a Department of Education. He wanted it to stay, one of my predecessors, he wanted to stay within Health and Human Services, HEW, because he thought it was more important to have the whole child focused on.
By the way, before I end this clip, I'm going to put in the poll, should teachers' unions be illegal?
So, of course, there are ways to fix the bureaucracy. Of course, there are ways to make things better. I mean, Elizabeth Warren just found millions of dollars of savings that could happen if people work together. But my point is this, and you just said it. States and localities run education. That's where 90% of the funding for education goes. They already run it. They should run it. The federal government should not run it. But if we want to try and make things better, like having different kinds of pathways for kids in terms of career and tech ed, the states and localities have not done this. I was a teacher, an AP history teacher in a career tech ed school in the 90s. We have to change. We have to make these pathways available. So if someone like Linda McMahon and I happen to agree on something like this, you need federal policy to be able to push this. Let's outcompete the world. We need education to do that. We need to have a Department of Education to do that and lean into that.
It's been a disaster, though, lady. And I mean, teachers' unions, I just put in the poll in the chat. Should teachers' unions be legal? Because I can't think of a single positive thing that teachers' unions have done. I mean, even unions, they started in a way where it was necessary. Like they had dudes working in sweatshops and like under damn near slave conditions. But unions overall are pretty much a drag on productivity and society. I mean, I'm not a fan of unions. I'm not a fan of minimum wage. I think that for the most part, you can get paid what you're worth. I mean, it's difficult in situations where because the whole thing that screws all this up is that things are much more expensive than they should be if things were actually following the right cycle of an economy. I say this in almost every episode. I'll say it again. Housing, food, energy, transportation, that's 60 to 70% of the average person's budget. Should be 5 to 10% of the average person's budget if we actually made those things in the way that we're capable of. We have the technology to make those things 5 to 10% of the average person's budget, but we don't do that because I go back to the concept of they want to slow the population growth. So if you want to slow the population growth, you have to dumb down the way that we use energy. You have to dumb down the means of transportation, like solar panels, for instance. Did you know there's a law that prohibits solar panels from being above 25% efficiency? The sun has enough energy from it to power the world for, I think it's billions and billions of years. If we could harness even a fraction of the power of the energy the sun gives off, we could power the entire world for free. Like, so why is it that there's a law that prohibits solar panels from being above 25% efficiency? Like, that's madness. So you see what I'm saying? Like, they dumb down our technology to make, like, if that was the case, you know how cheap things would be if we had free energy? It's crazy. Like, because that translates into food, that translates into housing, into energy, into transportation. And then imagine that. You don't need unions if the basic essentials of life are a fraction of your salary. Does that make sense? Madness. Absolutely madness. So let's go to, I think I have one more clip from a teacher, and then we could get off the whole teacher thing and talk about Stephen A. Smith and getting a little racy with some of us talk. Man, whenever you deal with these teacher people, like, who's seen House of Cards here? Remember that when he was dealing with the teacher protests, like if you could hold the education system hostage, and you're not a good organization. What they do that a lot with their bullshit. Like, teachers should be like completely paid off, like merit. You know, that I think that, imagine how productive the world would be if every job in the world had a like 10% commission aspect to it, in terms of like the last 10% of your salary is kind of floating, where if you underperform, you get 0% on that part. Like, say you make $100,000 a year and you have a metric that you're graded on. You can make, anywhere from an extra 10,000 to like 0,000, an extra 10,000 to $0 to $10,000 based off that metric, or even don't even have it capped, like depending on your performance. Like, if you found a way to add a commission aspect to everybody's job, the world would be so much more productive. Let's see what this guy has to say.
There was civility. We could disagree. We could have healthy conversations around what's best for kids. I respect differences of opinion. I don't have too much respect for people that are misbehaving in public and then acting as if they know what's right for kids. There was...
Okay, boring. Let's see, there's one more teacher clip that I wanted to play. Oh, yeah, this was a good tweet, I think.
Not one single student in 53 different Illinois public schools can do math at grade level. Let me repeat, not a single student in 53 different schools in Illinois can do math at grade level. Do not, under any circumstance, send your child to a public school. I know it sounds radical, but what do we hope to achieve when we send our kids to public school? Academic failure, stunted social skills, a dangerous environment where they might encounter shooters, transgender individuals in girls' spaces and sports, Marxist indoctrination. I would not wish my worst enemy's child to go to our modern public schools.
Yeah, that's pretty bad, but that sums it up. So, yeah, like the reason I went down that military industrial complex rabbit hole is because it's the same thing. It's the same amount of waste and fraud and abuse. Like, whenever giant piles of money gets thrown around to something, and then like the wrong numbers start going up. Like, I showed you that chart before that shows the number of administrators in schools has skyrocketed. The cost has skyrocketed, but the actual student retention, the reading scores, the math scores, the science scores, all fallen. So the things that you're trying to help got worse, and then unnecessary things skyrocketed. So that when that's the metric, you should have no patience or something like that. If you enjoyed the short clip, click right here to watch the full episode, and remember to subscribe to the channel. God bless.